Hello everyone. Today we're not going to be very loud or anything because my girlfriend is actually sleeping on the other side of that wall. But today I just wanted to have a little, I guess, Q&A video. I'm really working on the game right now, but I wanted to make sure that we had something out for the Saturday stream. It's just going to be pretty relaxed. If you have any questions that you want to ask me about anything, you can post those in the chat. I do have the chat open on the screen. Also, one thing I just want to get out of the way right here and now, I guess. If you do see my mouse on the screen, then I will let you know right now that it is not actually where my mouse is. As you can see, I am highlighting, but on the screen, the mouse is slightly to the side. It has to do with some visual glitch when I screen capture in OBS, but I just wanted to let you know that so it's not confusing in the future. So what I'm going to do to start off is I'm going to show you where I'm at compared to the last time that you guys saw this. So we're going to start up the game and you should be able to see it in the little window there. Here we go, and we might have some visual glitches. There we go. So as you can see, you can still pick up the fishing rod right off the start. So that's pretty straightforward. And little things like you can still cast the normal way. Nothing's changed there. One thing that has changed is I have added a way that you can retract the fishing line. So that allows you to kind of keep the screen a little bit more organized, so you can do things that you want and there isn't just some fishing line flying around everywhere. You can still technically put, so if you have the fishing rod out and you were to cast into the room here, then you can still have that still in the room when you leave. And so I don't know, I guess I'm not sure if that's necessarily a big problem, but we'll see. So right now, another thing that I've added is that if you get too far away from the end of your line, you actually, the line snaps. So you can see if I get really far away, the line snaps, and it's as if I am no longer casting the rod. The reason that I did this is twofold. For one, if you're running away from wherever you're fishing, I don't want the line to just stay there until the next time you hit the spacebar. So if you get too far away, the line snaps. Now this distance actually scales with how high your fishing level is. So if you have a higher fishing level, you can get further away from the rod, or the bobber, I guess, and still successfully keep the line attached. The reason for this is if you are hooked into a fish and the fish begins to run in a opposite direction, I want there to be some point where the line snaps. But that point should be, as you gain more fishing levels, you should be better at catching fish. So that means you can, perhaps you've upgraded your fishing rod or something like that. You can catch them from a further distance. And this also applies to the fact that you can actually cast further when you have a higher fishing level. So it isn't at the cap of where you can cast. It's actually 50% further than that. So if you cast the furthest you can, you still have 50% of that distance to work with, which means you actually have more distance to work with when you have a higher level. So I think it's a nice mechanic. I'm not sure how crazy it will get if you were to be, I don't know, like level 20 or something. If you could just cast it like into the next town, but I don't know. We'll get there when we get there. I don't think that too many people are going to get to that very soon, but as we implement more into the game, you should be able to see more reason to progress that far. So that's pretty much the total of what has been updated so far, and I can show you what I'm working on now. So I'm pretty satisfied with the actual character using the fishing rod, so that's not a problem. We'll get to the actual catching process, but the catching process cannot be created until we have fish to catch. So I want to exit out of here, and we're just going to focus on the code for a bit. So what I was looking at is the way that the player currently knows if they're in the water. So if the game knows the player's in the water, the way that they do this is with this collision function. So the way I have set this up, we have obstructions, which are pretty straightforward. They're pretty much anything. They can be rocks, they can be people, they can be chairs, I don't know. But so there's different types of obstructions, but they all fall under this category of obstruct, of this class of obstruct. So some of them can have conversations, some of them can have walls associated with them, and some of them can have like special conditions, and others don't have anything at all. They're just aesthetic, but it's just easy to put everything under this one class. But then I have this other class, water, because water is very specific as a feature. There's a couple things that need to be accounted for when you have the water. So the way the water is different is that is this collision function right here. So and actually the near check as well. I don't think so. So near check has not been updated yet because we haven't needed to. But it is going to be important. Actually, no, it shouldn't be too important because I'm only keeping track of the actual bobber position. So where the person is doesn't matter as long as they can cast into the water. So the collision here is the important part. So it takes itself, which is normal for a class function, and also this POS for position, not for piece of shit or anything like that. This POS variable that's being brought in is actually I call it that because it's something that has an X and a Y coordinate, so it has a position. And so what's happening here is it's checking to see if any of the areas that are associated with this water variable or this water class have the player in them. And if the players are in that area, are in one of those areas, and the areas are, I can show you that by setting this value up here to 1 and starting the game. The areas are what I use to define the shape of the water. So we just need to get out of here first. So that's going to take a couple seconds. But yeah, so the way that I denote where water is in a picture is through these areas, and these areas are geometric, so they're either rectangles or circles. In this case, you can see that this is kind of an extended circle. What I've done is I've actually set up a function for the slope of the line that is between the point here in the middle of this circle and the point here in the middle of this circle, and I've drawn circles at every integer step between these 2 points. So I believe it goes over maybe 2 and then up 5, and it continually does that until it gets all the way up to the top here, and then you have this somewhat continuous shape here. And it's easier to do things like this and cut a little corners because I mean, the way that I think of it, if you had a body of water like this, a small lake, someone could still stand in the shallows. So I don't necessarily think that it's important to exactly represent all of the water here. It's not like there's a sudden drop off right here. There could be a sudden drop off right here. But that's what you get with water. You can only see the top of it. So that's what I've decided, is that this shape that fills through this water is the actual water, and then the rest of it's just aesthetic. So it's checking to see if the user is in these areas, and since the user is in these areas, it switches to the swimming animation. Now, these areas are also going to be important for the fish, because the fish have to be in the water. So to ensure that, what I'm going to do is basically set up an animation and an AI motion, much like the cows. The cows have an AI motion right now. What that motion is they can move randomly for a random distance of their choosing, but they have to stay within a certain radius of their original spawn position. So that's why they don't go running off into different areas. That's why they also collide with objects, so they can't get up on the roof like they could previously. But that is how the cows work. They have animations for moving in any of the four directions, and then they can just move randomly throughout a small circle. What I'm going to do with the fish is, since fish have a little bit more free roaming ability, and I want them to have a little bit more free roaming ability, I want these fish to be able to go anywhere that there is still an area associated with the water. Now I'm debating whether, this may take a little bit to run over here, but I will show you, with the cutoffs of the areas. So if you remember the hierarchy, the areas have, and you can kind of see I'm sure it's confusing with me calling these areas and also the larger chunks areas, but these are areas within an object, and then the areas that I'm talking about for in terms of map positions are much larger. So you can see that there's a cutoff for the map area right here, and there is a new chunk of land here that has begun. So what I'm trying to decide about is whether fish can transfer between across these borders, because that will require a slightly more complicated system for the data tracking, because the way that these things are handled is that if something spawns in an area, it is associated with that area, and the area takes care of it. Basically, if I have the user, if I have the player in this area, then the area knows that it needs to print and account for all of the things that might be happening, since it is on the screen. So it shows that the area itself needs to print all of these objects. It needs to check the animations and make sure that things are moving if they need to. And then if I'm far away, it doesn't need to. But there's also a system where if there's like a chunk of land that's close to the current area you're in, it also prints that to the screen, because it needs to, because the screen is larger in the width direction than these chunks. So it needs to check to see if that is on the screen, and then it prints it to the screen. So what I'm thinking is that what would have to happen, so to give you some perspective, if I drop an object on the ground, do I have an object? Yeah, let's drop the fishing rod on the ground. That object, when I drop that, creates a class called a ground item in this area, and so the area keeps track of it. So if I were to leave the area and it's off the screen and come back, it's still there. So what I'm thinking is that it might be beneficial for each water source to have some sort of system like that. So if the water itself has some sort of um, giant array called fish, it can keep track of all the fish that are currently in its waterways. But if the fish are constantly checking to see if they are in an area, they can check to see where that area is. So if that area is in this water, um, then it will associate itself with that water and make sure it won't necessarily have to do anything because it was already here. But if the fish were to cross the border into this chunk of land, this is a new section of water. So this water will actually have to, well, the fish will probably, the fish class will have to update itself into the new water, um, and remove itself from the old water. So that shouldn't be too complicated. It would be just the same as a fish spawning. It would just have different initial values based off of what the initial values were in the first case. So in the first case, there'd probably be some random selection. But since it's crossing the border here, it doesn't necessarily change anything about it. So maybe if it were currently tailing, in the case of a redfish or something like that, it would still be tailing once it crosses this border, assuming that there's nothing that would normally spark change in the behavior. So that's kind of the idea. That's what I'm working with, but at the moment I still need to just get fish implemented. So what I'm doing is I'm actually focusing on this lake over here. And because it's a very simple waterway, there's no other connections to other areas, and all of the areas are pretty straightforward. It's also very small, so I can keep track of the entire environment, and make sure that something crazy isn't happening when there's walls relatively close to each other. So that's pretty much how it's working right now. So we're just going to try to get this figured out. Let me close out of the game until we're ready to bug test anything, and we'll see how that goes. So yeah, I was trying to, because right now I have this section in the code. Where is it? It's all about the fish. So I just wanted to create an entire new section, and you can see that I have these classes that I'm building up for specific types of fish. But I just copy and pasted the cow's animations for the fish right now, and I'm going to adjust them, and then I'm working on this class called fish, which is basically an object, but or an obstruction, but there's also it's going to be associated with specific water, and what I decided is that there won't necessarily be different pictures for different fish. There's just different behavior until you get them out of the water. So the different behavior is actually going to be what decides what is shown on the screen at the moment. So at the moment, I made a couple or 4 pictures for tailing, and if the fish is tailing at the moment, then it will be shown by a small triangle that is moving around in the water. So that is what these pictures are right now, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stock the base fish class with all of these pictures already, and then they will automatically be updated as the animation decides what is currently shown on the screen. But I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get it so that I can see these on the screen and decide whether they are what I'm looking for. So that's why I was looking at the way that the water keeps track of if the person is in the water. Because if that's the case, and the way I set it up is beneficial to this, I can do the exact same for the fish and just say that if the fish is going to be out of water based off of the move that it's trying to make, then um, then negate that move and cancel whatever you're doing. So then it would just be stopped when it gets to the shore. Um, so you can see this is that's walls. So this is water. So water is this collision thing that I was talking about, and it checks to see if the person or whatever you're asking about is currently in the water, or in a position where it could be swimming. Uh, so so yeah, that's how it's going right now. And that's I'm probably not going to be talking too much if I'm trying to figure stuff out. But if you do have any questions, please leave those in the chat, and I'll see how I can answer them. Yeah, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and edit the animation, just so it's an object that stays in the water. And then what I'll do from there is that I'll I'll just have it automatically print the tail to the screen, and we'll see if we can actually see that in the lake. If so, we're going to initially make it so that there's always one fish in the lake, and then we'll just see how the behavior works. And if that's the case, then and if it ends up looking how I'm hoping it does, then I can expand onto more sophisticated animation. So right now, it checks to see if it's swimming. So that's not going to be a problem for the fish. So that's not necessarily necessary. Well, I say that a lot. That's not necessary. So yeah. Let's. And then the else statement is obsolete. So right now here it is doing the actual timer and animation, but we're not going to have. We might. So maybe that's not how I want to handle that. But yeah, I guess if the animation is only one long, that's not necessarily a problem. It should still properly print these to the screen. I just have to consider that it needs to be an array for each one. Yeah. Because the way that these animations work is this animation actually just facilitates what picture is being currently printed to the screen. And so that's what this image cycling is. And so if there's an array of images, it will cycle through them. So what I can do is I can actually make each of these an array that's just one index long, and that should make it so that the current mechanic still works. Even though there's not a multiple amount of images, it will still cycle through the one in a certain amount of time and then move back to itself. So it's not a problem, and then that allows me to make it so that if I don't know if I wanted to have some sort of animation for the actual fish moving through the water with its tail out of the water, or if it was like kind of a swiggly motion, then I could add that in the future. Um, but the difference with the fish animation is actually going to be um, it's actually going to be what picture is currently cycling through. So the fish animation is going to need to decide whether um, it's going to need to decide which thing is actually being shown on the screen, and sometimes it won't be anything. Sometimes it'll be blank. So I may have to create some pictures that don't have anything in them, just as placeholders, and um, and have those printed to the screen if the fish is blank. Now that's not probably not the best way to do things data-wise. Um, I could just set up some sort of if statement checking to see if the current data structure has a none value or a null value in the place of the picture text here, but I don't know, I'm lazy. So that should be fine. It's just going to be a matter of deciding um, it's going to be a matter of deciding which which images are cycling, but I'm trying to think. Oh, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why that's weird. So the reason that it has self in here, which doesn't really make sense, is because I took it from here. And that's not necessarily what I want. I want to have a full class that is much like that. So maybe I don't need to have these here. Maybe I can have them in the animation. So let's do that for now. So once again, we have to remove this else statement. We have to take all this, bring it back, remove that. But now we have all of this here. So I'm trying to think, how is this working? It's got, this is the problem. Like I write all this code, but then I have to go back and figure out how it worked in the first place, which I think is pretty common. But I'm sure if I had a better plan of attack starting this out, I would probably have some more organization. So I don't need swimages. I was pretty happy with that variable name when I thought of it. So this is going to be fish Annie. So what is this A value? A is the area. What does it use the area for? Is that the range that it can move around? No, the radius is here. So let me go through here. Move check, probably need that. Home, we're not going to need these. Yeah, because it doesn't need to know where it started. The fish can have free roam throughout the entire river. Steps. Yeah, that one's nice. The steps value here for the cows is basically the maximum amount of distance that they can travel. So what they do is it finds a random number between 0 and this steps value, and then it starts moving in, yeah, so there's between 1 and steps. So that's the goal it's trying to get to. And it may not actually get there because, as we said, there was a radius that was restricting them, or perhaps they'd be impeded by some sort of building. So what would happen is it would continue walking until it would hit, either reach its goal or hit some sort of obstruction. And once it did that, if it hit some sort of obstruction, it would completely cancel the goal, pick a new goal, or perhaps I think there was a waiting period, so it couldn't make. There's a random wait period. So the pause time, yeah, pause time, and this pause time was anywhere between. So it's 10 seconds, but it's buffered by this frequency value, which is actually going to be nice that that's already there. So the frequency is the average frequency per 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds I want the cows to move, I don't know, 3 times on average. But we don't want it to just constantly move 3 times every 10 seconds, so that would be weird. So this value picks a random value for the timer to count up to before it chooses a new goal. Oh, actually, before it begins its next goal. It chooses its new goal right here. So I think this position changing stuff is all going to be relatively similar. But the only difference is that the fish won't have any restrictions, other than the fact that they have to still be in the water. So, yeah, we're gonna have to. The thing is that the way that the user checks to see if they're in the water is they check all of the water sources in the current area that they're in. And if they transfer into a new area, then they don't have to check the other water sources. But for the fish, we could do the same thing, but the fish would have to know what area it's in, which may become problematic. But actually, what it's currently doing, it's feeding area in there. So I guess that's not too much of a problem as long as I keep track of what's going on here. So to initiate this, it has to have self.props sent to it, and it also has to have area sent to it. And I guess I can just live with that, because it should be similar to the cows. It'll just have to transfer between areas. So I think for right now, we'll act as if the fish is not going to transfer between areas, and then I'll go and make the adjustments to that in the future. So right now we have image cycling, which should just cycle through one of these, and then image loading is going to be we don't need any of the swimages. So this image load, I believe what it is it's actually it's to kind of accommodate for the fact that people have to save the game. So when you save the game, it has to reload all of these images in. And the way that it does that is it it has all of the file paths of them. There's a problem with Python. You can't save the surface that you're creating when you print something to the screen. You have to just save the file path and then reopen it, because if the previous screen was closed, that screen was associated with a different file location, or like data address, I guess, and the and so you have to just reopen the picture in the new screen. So that's what this is doing, and we have images here. I'm just debating whether, so what's probably going to happen is that we'll have to change, we can use this, we can abuse this actually. So since this is something that would normally run at the start or whenever you load the game, what we can do is we can just switch what the image path is, and then we can from there we can change what the we can just run this, and it will automatically load all of them into images, and the images will already be cycling through because of this run function. So that should work. Yeah, I think that should work. I'm wondering if that's something we can do. If the water doesn't necessarily need to have that associated with it, maybe we can have the area keep track of the fish, because the fish are already obstructions. And then these fish will just have to have some sort of yeah, they'll just have to have some sort of analog, because the way that the area will check obstructions and deal with them is by calling something like a run, not necessarily a run, the objects. So if we go up to obstruction, yeah, obstruct here. So obstruct has all of these different functions, and basically what we'll have to do is, in the fish class, we'll just have to create all these functions with the exact same name, but then call the obstruction function in each of them. So that's not that big of a problem. And then there might be some situations where, like, load will have some extra things before you call the obstruct version of it. The same with ImageLoad, but print should be the same, so you should be able to just call obstruction print. Print top should be the same, and then collisions and near check and things like that should be relatively the same. Maybe we can, maybe that's an idea. Maybe we can adjust the collisions so that there's a possibility that the fish could still run into walls, because the obstruction collision would take care of that. But in the fish collision, if the fish exits the area that is associated with the water, then that will also count as a collision. So I think that's what we can do. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to grab, yeah, let's just grab all of this. And we're going to go through each one of them and delete what we don't need and replace it with the obstruction version of it. So we'll go back down to the fish. So you can see I was kind of doing this already. So let's go with that. And so for load, so we're going to delete all this because that's already taken care of. If we just say self dot prop dot load, data. And then if we go, we can load each individual thing like this. So these should be taken care of. Dot type equals data dot type. Oh, so this should be data dot prop, because this data that will be fed to it will be in the shape of the fish class. So the data here will be, we'll have to tell it that we want the obstruction class to be fed to the obstruction itself so that it can load that. So data.type self dot water equals data dot water, and self dot tail equals data dot tail. And so I'm still debating whether I want to have, I don't think I'm going to have the images here. I think I'm going to have the images in the actual animation itself. And then from here, it will decide whether it's going to do a specific thing based off of the fish's traits. So we'll get to that in a bit, maybe not on stream, but yeah. So for image load, we have to do the same thing. Trying to think. Oh, that's just image load. Let me go up to obstruct. So does load call image load anywhere? No, it just has the image paths already, and then image load. Yeah, image load. I should just be able to, or I can just go like that. I should just be able to call props.ImageLoad, because it should do all of this, because the animation is actually associated with props. So we should just be able to go self.props.ImageLoad or ImageLoad. So like I said, that function actually just loads the individual images. Yeah, yeah. For print should be handled, so backspace that, enter self dot props dot print. Okay, so here's where it's going to get interesting. Near check shouldn't matter. Near check, actually, yeah, it will matter. So if you get close to a fish, but the fish won't have any walls, so we might have to do something weird with that. But basically, if you get close to a fish, I want it to run away. So we'll leave near check in here, and probably what'll happen is it will just always return 0, but it will have something checking here, and if the player is near the fish, then the fish will run. So for collision is going to, collision still needs to return either 1 or 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to have check equal to 0 if self dot, actually check can be equal to self dot props dot collision pose, and then in the end we're going to return check, but here we're also going to check to see if the fish is in a specific area of the water. So if we remember all the way back up here at water, for water, that's wall. Water has this collision check. So what the collision check does is it sets swim equal to 1. But it doesn't count as a collision. So what we need to do, oh damn it, we need to go back down to fish. Alright, so does fish have I don't think we need to feed it the water. That shouldn't be important. So let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of this. So it should be relatively simple, relatively similar to a regular object, but so what I'm thinking here is if it has self.swim, as equal to 0, right? Then what we can do is this. So I'm also going to do this just so we can keep track of that for down here. So self.area so the way that area works, area has a function called collision, and collision goes through all of the different buildings and obstructions, but some of these obstructions are water. So yeah, I think that actually, if the fish portion is actually taking care of the collision completely by doing this, then we don't need, oh sorry, yeah, here we go. We don't need this at all. So what we can do is we can say that check is equal to self.area.collision, and then if self.swim is equal to 1, then check is equal to self.swim. Yeah. Because I want to do it this way because there is going to be a situation where there could be a situation where something might run into an object but still be like in the water if it were to go forward or something weird like that, but I don't know. So check self.swim, and then always after this self.swim is going to be set back to 0. And the reason for that is that if it goes forward and it's still in the water, then we want to keep track of that. So it has to be constantly checking to see if it's in the water. But yeah, we're about to come up on an hour here, so I don't know that I'm necessarily going to get too much shown to you guys, but I hope that this general discussion was nice for anybody that wants to listen to it. And it definitely helps me just to kind of get the words out there. So but yeah, I think I'm gonna sign off here, but I want to thank you guys for watching. I don't think we'll have a tax episode. I just haven't been able to get it organized recently, but I believe Dan and OC should be relatively more available in the next few weeks because school is starting up, so everybody's kind of in one place. So they are on deck for playing tax. So whenever they can, whenever we can figure out a time to get them on the stream, I will let you guys know about that. I'm also planning to talk to someone tonight about having a guest stream, and this is a fellow YouTuber. So I guess if you've waited this long in the video, then you deserve to know. I'm talking with a YouTuber by the name of Sam Onella, and so he has a YouTube channel called Sam Onella Academy, and that on that YouTube channel he has shorter, like 5-minute videos where he has MS Paint-esque drawings. Um, he creates animations, and then he teaches you something in those 5 minutes. So if you haven't seen him before, go check him out. But hopefully I'll be able to get him on the stream, to just have a general guest stream, and we'll see where things go from there. So thank you guys for watching. I will definitely see you. I usually, I should probably not say definitely, but I will probably see you on Tuesday with another cover. If not, definitely I will see you on Thursday. But you guys know the schedule by now, so I'm planning to try and be as consistent as possible in this transition into the school semester. So keep me true to that, and if you have any um, random thoughts about the game, feel free to leave those in the comments below. But until the next time, I am going to be signing off, so thank you and goodbye.